Uh, Zoila just pointed out something. Did I pronounce her name right? Okay. She just pointed out something to me. Pardon me? Yeah. Okay. But one thing we can know when we go into the grocery store to the produce department, the number on here, if it starts with 9, it's 94011. If it's just 4011, that means just banana grown the regular way. But if you have a 9 in front of it, that means it's organic. So you can know.
I believe also 5 is GMO. I haven't seen too many.
8 is GMO.
Or is it 8?
8 is GMO.
Okay.
So if you see an 8, avoid it. If you see a 9, then that's good. That's organic there. Okay. And let's see, this is 5 numbers, so if it's only 4 numbers, then that's just regular way of growing there. Okay, a couple of things here. Some of you have, a lot of you seen Planting by the Blueprint or have it already there. Because of changes, I want you to go and read this. It's in your handout in Planting by the Blueprint. Because of changes in agriculture, because of things that we have learned, it just makes a difference there. Now we have to eat all year round, not just when our gardens are in full swing for a couple, 3 months there. And I want to tell you that I have been in places that have weather as severe as we have here in Ontario, where people have been eating out of their gardens all year. Now, let me describe how that works. The winter garden, or what you're going to eat in the winter time, has to be grown in the summer. And so we grow beets and carrots and turnips and whatever there, potatoes, whatever we're going to grow, we grow that in the summer garden. Before the first hard frost, we cover that produce with dry straw or leaves. Now, it has to be dry, and then we put a tarp over that. And then you've got to put something on that tarp so it doesn't fly away in the next windstorm. What happens is that as we go down in the ground, we get about 5.5 to 6 feet down, and we have a constant temperature in the ground. Now here it's probably about 52 degrees Fahrenheit. What would that be? Centigrade. I need to. Okay. Anyway, that's pretty warm. About 11 Celsius. Okay. About 11 Celsius. That's pretty warm. When it's minus 30, well, what would that be? That would. Minus 1, minus 2. Okay. But when it gets way below zero here, that land is still, when we're down 5.5, 6 feet, it's still 11 Celsius. So there's heat there. Now here's what happens. The earth is going to warm up and cool down the most on the surface. And then as we go down, it's a little less and a little less and a little less until we get to that about 6 feet, let's call it, there. Now, what affects this is how far we are from the equator. So if I'm in Miami, Florida, that temperature is about 70 degrees when I go down there. If I go way up into Alaska or way up in Canada into the tundra there, where it's constantly frozen, we go down that same 6 feet, and it's permafrost, but it's a constant temperature there. So it has more to do with how far we are from the equator than anything else. It has less to do with altitude as you go up and down in the mountains. I live where I can easily go to sea level, or I can go to 7,000-8,000 feet in the mountains, and it's the same temperature. In my part of the world, California, there it's 57 degrees. So it's 57 degrees if I'm down at sea level, It's 57 degrees if I'm at my house at a couple thousand feet, and it's 57 degrees if I'm up at 7,000 or 8,000 feet in the mountains there. So we can use these things to good advantage here. All right, year-round gardening. I'm going to talk about the Omega greenhouse, and then I'm going to talk about a do-it-yourself backyard greenhouse, which is as inexpensive as I know how we can do it. We're going to talk about the water canopy greenhouse. Now, nobody manufactures the water canopy greenhouse. If you do this, you're going to have to make it yourself, and I believe that we can do it. We have already done it. We are working on the possibility of making this water canopy greenhouse so inexpensive that we'll be able to use it in third world countries. Haven't done it yet, but that's what the goal is here. Part of the reason for that goal is when we made the Omega greenhouse, I kind of gave the engineers free rein and said, these are the results that we want at the end. Just go, I don't care how we get to it, let's just do it. And so they did a good job, but for most people it's too expensive. Yeah. And we use polycarbonate, which is a good material. It's what the best greenhouses are made out of today. It is a double pane. You can actually get it in a triple pane even. But there's not a lot of insulation value to that. A little, but not a lot there. So we managed to make that greenhouse, but it's way too expensive for most people. I'll show you prices here in a minute. There. Then we do a screenhouse greenhouse combination, and we use that in the tropics. We have lots of problems all over the world in different places, and particularly in the tropics we have problems with insects. And when I went to Brazil the first time, they had planted tomatoes all over this property in planting holes, and they had interplanted, which is contrary to what we're told in the Spirit of Prophecy and in the Bible. Don't interplant, don't mix your plants there. Anyway, they had done that. So I went out and I picked a bunch of tomatoes that were ripe, took them up to the kitchen, and when we opened them, there was only one tomato and about 10 that was edible. The rest of them were full of little tiny worms there. Now what happens is there is a little insect about the size, a little moth about the size of a housefly, and she comes and lays her eggs on the flower, on the tomato flower or the zucchini flower or pepper or cucumber, whatever. She lays it right in the flower there. So as the fruit begins to form there, then all these little eggs hatch and they go into the fruit, and by the time you open it up, of course it's full of worms, and of course it's no good there. So we had some big challenges with that. We did the greenhouse combination there, and it did a good job. For one thing, well, I'll describe that in a minute there. Then we did simple hoop houses, just some hoops with some plastic over it to make some type of a simple greenhouse there. Okay, we need to eat all year round, not just 3 or 4 months when the garden is in full production. And for most families, a combination, this is just 20 feet by 12 feet, and it's about 13 feet tall. This is the Omega greenhouse, and combining that with an outdoor garden and possibly a temporary hoop house, you'll be able to grow and have abundant fresh fruit all year round there. Now, by studying principles first from the Bible, then instruction from Ellen White's writings, and then careful observation of nature. Now, to me, those are 3 sources of divine wisdom. Okay, we often say that nature is God's other book there. So if we carefully observe nature, we can get a lot of things there. And then, of course, the Bible and the Spirit of Prophecy are obviously divine sources of wisdom there. So we designed a house that's like no other on earth. And the key to food self-sufficiency is, or could be, this 20 by 12 by 13. Now, we call it the Omega greenhouse, and if it's properly used. This is not a typical greenhouse with a typical greenhouse problems. What are these typical greenhouse problems? Okay. Overheating. If any of you have greenhouses, you know that they just overheat like crazy when the sun shines. Even in the middle of winter, sometimes there's too much heat there. Then loss of heat through the glazing. As soon as the sun goes down, we have this glazing, and even if it's double glazing, it's not really much insulation, and we lose the heat through that very quickly. So overheating and loss of the heat are big problems with regular greenhouses. Excess humidity. In most greenhouses that you walk into, they're uncomfortable. They're muggy there, and of course it's the moisture building up in the corners that makes for diseases. And we actually have a name for this. We call it greenhouse soil disease. Now, years ago, going clear back into the 1700s and the 1800s, of course, only very rich people could afford greenhouses. They were made out of glass. And what they would do back then is that they would come in and they would take out 18 inches or so of soil out of that greenhouse. They would take it out and they put it out in the field there. That means they had to get new soil and bring it in there. Now, that soil sitting out there, that soil that had become diseased, sitting out there in the sunshine and the rain and the snow, the freezing and the cool there, nature healed it. And it was okay. So leave it out there a couple of years and you could bring it back in. Obviously, this is a very expensive way to run a greenhouse, to be changing soil like that. But just leaving it open to the fresh air and the sunshine, nature takes care of those problems. Okay. So this avoids that. This particular greenhouse, matter of fact, the design you'll see in a minute here, the whole greenhouse is a dehumidifier. So when I walk into my greenhouse, it's never over humid. It's always a comfortable temperature there. Okay, here's a picture of one that we put up at the factory, 20 by 12 by 13. What you can expect, it's very strong. It's strong enough to withstand 90 miles per hour winds and 40-pound snow loads. It's easy enough for an ambulatory, frail, 90-year-old widow. This was part of our goals as we were doing this. We wanted a frail but ambulatory 90-year-old widow, 90-pound widow we even said, who could handle this. So now I had a little Chinese girl come down from Weimar to look at this greenhouse, and she said, "Oh, Lynn," she said, "there's no way I can handle that. It's panels are 4x8 panels there." I said, "Yes, yes, you can." Her name is Trudy Lou, or it was Trudy Lou at the time. She's been married since. Anyway, she was not 90 years old, but she was 90 pounds. And said, "Sure you can, Trudy." And sure enough, she just picked that up and move it, no problem. Now you don't want to take those panels in and out when there's much of a wind, because that's quite a sail there. But that was part of our goal, that it could be easily handled there. It's designed to protect your plants from too much heat, too much cold, of course from the wind there. Incidentally, Trudy Lou just called me last week, and I was delighted to hear from her. I haven't heard from her for a while. And I had to tell her, "I'm on my way to the airport. Can you call me a week from Friday when I'll be home again?" So, okay, preparing the soil for the Omega greenhouse. This is, well, I've got pictures here, don't I? But let's go through this. Now, this is from the foundation down, just from the foundation down. This is going to vary at your particular spot. But for me, on this particular greenhouse, we used cement block, we used rebar, cement, staples. We had a 3-inch drain. We had a great French drain pipe, and we put a big sock over it, which I don't think is necessary, but we did. We had gopher wire, which I do think is necessary. And in this case, we actually bought topsoil, because this was going in a place where there was no topsoil. And then we need rock. In the Ellen White planting method, there's a layer of rock there. We want that 2 to 4 inches thick that layer of rock or gravel there. I lost my place here. Rock. Okay. Automatic window vents. Now, the greenhouse industry has done. They make these little arms, and as the temperature rises, in that little arm, there's either a wax or some other material that will expand with the heat. So when it expands, it pushes the window open, and it opens your vent automatically. You don't need any electricity. That'll do it automatically. And the sun goes down and gets cold, it will shrink and pull itself shut again. So that's kind of a nice thing, and you need that. Even if you have all the best controls and so forth, you still need that, I think, because the electricity may go off. You may lose it there. Okay. We used labor. We used a U-Turn for Christ group, and we paid them a total of $600. It's like a halfway house, and we help these guys, and they help us, and they were great there. Then we had custom blended fertilizers, and we did spend about $250 on that. So our total cost there was just under $3,000. So first you want to choose a spot facing south with full sun, and you need to make sure that has full sun in the summertime. You don't need it full sun in the wintertime. You don't need it in the summer, but we sure need that full sun in the winter. So no trees that are going to block it, anything like that. Okay. If you ordered one of these, they would send you the measurements to just exactly there. Now we say 12 by 20, and some guy that bought a greenhouse from us, he told some teenagers to go out there and make the foundation for it. He said, well, it's 12 feet by 20 feet. So they made it 12 by 20. Well, it didn't fit. We had to extend the foundation out one end because they give it to you in exact amounts there, and it's important that is done exactly right there. Okay. Then we layered in the gopher wire overlapping the length of the foundation. We seal it with staples. We also lined the walls with insulation foam. And fill those different layers, the Ellen White method. Let's see if we can find some other pictures here. Okay, each greenhouse is built first in the factory, then taken down and delivered. There. Okay, digging your planting hole. Now we wanted that hole 3 feet deep, the size of the greenhouse. The factory will give you the exact measurements in inches and 1/8 of an inch even, depending on which greenhouse you choose. It is important to separate the topsoil from the subsoil. We double dug out here, gave an illustration of that, and we didn't want to take that subsoil out and put it on the top. The same thing as with the greenhouse. You want to take the topsoil and put it on one side and the subsoil on another side. We want to use topsoil in that greenhouse. Now, greenhouse space is precious. It's expensive. And so use the very best that you can. Use the topsoil there. Okay, next the hole is aligned with a foam insulation board. This is in this case could be supported with wood or hardy board, or cement block is what we chose. Then we sometimes use a hardware cloth stapled to the outside, if it's wood, as a rodent barrier. These rodents have keen senses of smell, and they can smell that there's a whole house full of wonderful food in there, and they want to get in there. So we've got to keep them out there. Okay, then the hole is filled in layers using the Ellen White planting method. And we use a 4-inch drain pipe. It's placed on the gravel layer about 2 feet apart. I'll show that in a minute here. Okay, we want that pipe. This is a French drain pipe, so it's got holes all the way along it there, and we want it to exit in opposite ends of the greenhouse. One end is going to go clear to the very top of the greenhouse because hot air goes up. The other end goes to the opposite end of the greenhouse, and it exits just above the ground level there. we're going to circulate air through that. This is important. This will provide heating, cooling, and air to the roots and the microbes. So we're getting multiple use out of this. We're getting heating, we're getting cooling, and microbes there. Okay, now here's the diagram for the Ellen White planting method, and you've got it in your handout. So if you just go to that and copy that as the way that you put the soil back into the greenhouse there. So the first 1 foot is rich amended soil, and then we have a 2 to 4 inch layer of gravel rock on top of that. Then we have this 4 inch drain tile or pipe, or 3 or 4 inch in diameter that snakes around through there, and then a foot of topsoil on top of that, and then the amended soil on the top again there. So just do that. Now here is this is actually the first one we ever built there. So you pour the foundation. It's got to be level, and you can see that pipe on one end is, well, it's laying out here. That's the pipe that's going to go clear to the top of the greenhouse. And then the exit on that is over there by the tractor in the foundation. There, the opposite end of that. Okay. Now, here's the greenhouse being delivered on site. Now you can see by our coats and whatever that it was a rather cool day there. It was in the middle of winter. And when we left the factory, this was in Auburn, California, it started to snow. And on the way over there, it snowed more and more and more. And I said to my wife, maybe we should call the truck and cancel out because it's just snowing so hard. She said, you know, I've gone on a lot of Maranatha trips, and often we have weather problems when we go on these Maranatha trips. She said, when we do, we just stop and we pray, and we ask God to solve the weather problem for us. And she said, you know, he does. And we're able to complete their projects and make things work out. I said, well, okay. You pray and I'll drive. And anyway, we did pull off, and we prayed about it. You know, it kept snowing, kept right on snowing. But we kept driving. We called the truck and we said, well, let's go forward. So we drove all the way to the site. It snowed the whole way until we got there, and it quit just as we drove into that driveway. Now you can see there's no snow on the ground here. And we had that whole greenhouse just in the back of this small bed pickup there. So there's a young man that did a lot of the engineering work for us, and what he's doing now is just putting that metal strip down that we're going into the cement that we're going to attach everything to there. It's important that when we prepare the soil, we do a lot of work to get air into that soil. We talked about plowing the field. We talked about double digging. We want air in that soil. The fastest way to grow a plant is aeroponics, meaning that there's nothing but air and water nutrients flowing over that. So we need air. We need lots of air there. So when you prepare the soil in the greenhouse, put out some big planks or some plywood or something so that as you walk there, because you're going to have to walk all over that thing to put this thing up. So put something there so that the weight from your feet is distributed and you're not compressing that soil. Same thing in your garden, like we did earlier today. Once you have that soil all fluffed up, whatever, don't walk on it. Step over it or around it, but don't walk on it. Don't compress it there. For every square inch, you put approximately 8 pounds of pressure on that soil, and we want to keep that light and fluffy and easy for the plant roots to go through there. Okay, there's the first panel going up, and you do need several hands. You probably need 3 or 4 people to put this up because it's unstable. You builders, when you put up trusses for a roof, you know that first one is a problem to get up and get settled just right. And then when you have several of them nailed together, then you've got some stability. So the same thing is true here. We've got to be careful to get this up. We don't want it to blow over or bend over there for us there. So now we've got the first few up there. And you can see what I'm talking about there as far as walking on that soil. I told these people, please get some boards out there, but didn't seem to help. Yeah. Okay, we started about 2:30 in the afternoon, a cold and rainy winter day, and we finished for dinner around 6 p.m. Not bad for a first try, getting the first one up there. It started to get dark, and the guy here on the end with his hands up like this is the owner of that property. It's a little, it's Brownsville Lifestyle Center. So it's like a mini Weimar or Uchi Pines or something like that. So they have a little lifestyle center there. They do a good job there. And anyway, it started to get dark, and Anthony says, hey, you guys aren't getting out of here until we get this thing up. And he went and got some cords and put some lights up there, and we finished that. And I got out of there about 6 o'clock. Well, about 6 o'clock we went in to eat. Now I want to give you some prices on this thing. This is from the foundation up. Remember, I gave you prices from the foundation down on that particular greenhouse. From the foundation up, this 12 by 20 is about $14,500. And then it can be extended in 4-foot increments. So you can start, it doesn't make sense to do anything less than about 20 feet and 12 feet wide. And we don't have anything wider at this point than the 12 feet wide. You've got to, we've got to crawl before we can walk and walk before we can run here. So at this point, we just have the 12 foot wide. But we can make it in 4-foot increments longer than that, and we can make it as long as you want there. Okay, let's talk about the water canopy greenhouse. If we go into Genesis, this particular thing has intrigued me since I've been a boy. So Genesis 1:6 and 7. Then God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. Thus God made the firmament, divide the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. The firmament just means air, sky, there. Now, there's a little bit of water in the firmament today. There's a little bit of moisture in the clouds, but there's no water above the firmament. That all collapsed at Noah's flood. Remember the people before the flood, the wise men, they said, it's impossible to rain. This cannot happen. And they were right. They were absolutely right. Does it rain when we have high pressure or low pressure? Low pressure, okay. How about fogs? I'm talking about the Thule fog that just settles above the freeway. In California, the Central Valley, sometimes we have these thick fogs. And sometimes you're driving on the freeway 70 miles an hour, and all of a sudden you hit that fog bank and you can't see. And so there are these pileups, sometimes 50, 60, 70, 100 cars pile up there. So it's a serious problem. What about those fogs? Do they form in high pressure or low pressure? Anybody have an answer? They actually only form, that type of fog only forms in high pressure. In high pressure. Okay? If we read a little farther in Genesis, it tells us that there was a mist or a fog that came up from the ground and went out and watered the whole face of the earth there. We could only get that with high pressure, and it cannot rain. It will not rain under high pressure conditions. So these people before the flood, they were absolutely right. They said it's impossible, can't help, can't be done. It's against the laws of nature. They were right. But God had another idea, didn't he? That water canopy above collapsed, and then the whole world was changed from that point on there. Okay. Here we have soil temperatures at 6 feet, pretty consistent at about 55 degrees. This is in western Tennessee. And that's about the same degrees that you would have if you ever travel back in Virginia and you go through some of those caves through the Shenandoah Valley and whatever. It's about 54 to 55 degrees, and it's a constant temperature there. It never changes there. So here we have a cold winter day in Tennessee. But the temperature is the same if we get down a few feet there. This is the first water canopy greenhouse that I know of that was built anywhere. And this looks like a big bushel basket, but what it is it's 37 feet in diameter. It was round. It was built with straw bale. Now, with straw bale construction, we need post and beam to carry the weight, and then the straw bale is kind of infill. There are some straw bale structures which are built where the straw itself is holding the weight of the roof, and in this case, Dr. Calvin Dents didn't realize that he needed post and beam, and so he made this so that the straw itself held the weight of the roof. Well, the weight of this roof is pretty heavy because there's a lot of water there, and water is heavy there. The intended depth was about 1 foot of water over that whole greenhouse area there. Well, after a few years, one side of that greenhouse subsided a little bit. That meant that water went over there, so there was more weight on this side and less weight on the other side, and it didn't take too terribly many years until this thing was lopsided, and we had way too much water on one side and no water on the other there. So he drained the water, got his tractor out, and destroyed it, and we had to build he had to build a new greenhouse there. This is the inside of that particular greenhouse, and one thing that was very interesting to me, when I found out about this, I immediately made friends with Dr. Dents and talked with him on the phone, and I have kept a running conversation with him probably for the last 15 years or so there. I actually did not meet him in person until 2 years ago. But I kept notes on it all this time so that I would know temperature differences and growth and whatever there. And repeatedly he has told me that inside the greenhouse, underneath the water, that he will get much greater growth than the same identical plant just a few feet outside. I'll give you an example there. I was in Honduras, and some people brought us some papayas that were just wonderful. They weren't genetically modified back then. These were very good papayas. So I did what you're not supposed to do. I dried some of the seed, and I brought it home in my pocket. Now, you'd never get away with that today. They would take it all away from you. I've tried it, and you can't bring seeds or whatever across borders like that. Anyway, so I did get that papaya seed home, and I sent him some in an envelope in January. He planted in little peat pots, and then he put those on the back of his refrigerator because it's a little warmer there to sprout and to grow. When those little papaya seeds grew and became little trees, when they got warm enough that he could plant them outside, he took 10 and he put them in the outside garden. And he took 3 and he put them in the greenhouse garden. Well, I called him about June sometime, and I said, "How are those papayas doing?" He said, "They're doing really good." He said, the color is good, and I've got 10 of them outside, and they're up 12 to 14 inches. And I said, no, Calvin, tell me about those in the greenhouse. Oh, those. He said, well, those 3 are 6 and 7 feet tall, and they're covered with 72 green papayas there. So let's look at a picture of them there. So same plants, just covered with little green papayas there. So the growth is about 10 times bigger, better, more vigorous inside that greenhouse than it is outside. Now, if you go back and you look at the history of the Earth and you look at fossils and you look at the age of man, which is another thing, but we look at all these things and we find out that before the flood, things did grow about 10 times bigger and faster and more vigorous there. Told you about the skeleton of Noah that was 12 feet there. And if we do the math on that, that skeleton that man would have had to be over 2,000 pounds. Well, that's 10 times what a big man would be today. So, and in trees and in all these different things we find this. So we can get some of these benefits by copying this in our own little way here. Okay, so he had to destroy the water, the straw bale. Had to destroy that straw bale because it wasn't working there. So then he decided to build a cinder block greenhouse, and you see he's got three little windows in the back here. That's his wife standing there. This time, instead of using plastic, the first one he used plastic, and he used let me rephrase that. He put up big beams, and on these big beams he stapled cement wire. You know, the stuff we put in driveways and foundations there. So he stapled that wire as tight as he could. Then he took just a big piece of visqueen, clear plastic, spread it out there, put it up over the side of the bales, and put his hose in to fill it up with water there. Well, that was very difficult to clean. And you can see in this picture that this is open to the fresh air and the sunshine. Let me go back a couple here. You can see that this is open to the fresh air and the sunshine. You can also see that he's way too close to trees there. So leaves would blow in, and there are shadows there on the greenhouse. You want to be in a better place than that. So this had to be cleaned every now and then. This was a pain in the neck to clean. So he drained the water, and you can see from that you would have lots of little dips in there to try to clean that out. So the next time he wanted to use glass, and he wanted a nice smooth surface. So they were tearing down a store in town, and he salvaged the windows. So again, he had to put up big beams, and so part of the window glass would come on this side, part of it would come on this side, and he made that so that it would fit just right there. Now at the far end, he had a big board, a 12-inch board, 2x12 there, hooked with piano hinges, and so he could unlatch this, drop it down, and for a few minutes he'd have a little Niagara Falls, and then it would all drain out. He'd get up there with his hose, spray it off, and this was much easier to clean there. But you can see he still had a lot of debris to clean out there. Occasionally ducks would land in this there. So anyway, this worked much, much better for him, but he only put 4 inches of water in this. The previous one was 12 inches. This is 4 inches. I'll tell you that the 4 inches worked, but that the 12 inches worked better by a few degrees, and it really was better that way. So the more water you can get, the better there. Okay, here's another picture of it there. Okay, this is how he put the thing together, and it worked very well. Now, Dr. Dents had never, until he talked to me, he'd never heard of Ellen White's planting method or anything, and so he took about 8 inches of topsoil and put it in the bottom of this greenhouse, and that's what he was growing on. In spite of that, he got good results from this. Let's go to do-it-yourself. Let's go to a very inexpensive backyard greenhouse. You get some friends together, collect any scrap materials you can find, dig a hole 3 feet deep. These guys did this by hand. and they separate the topsoil from the subsoil. Got two different piles there. Line the sides with, in this case, they line the sides with foam insulation. Now you need that foam insulation no matter what you're doing here, otherwise you're going to lose that heat sideways. So you've got to have that foam insulation. You've got to have insulation that is not going to fill up with water there. You add the soil amendments in layers, just like we did out there in the garden, and just like we'll do with the Ellen White planting method. And then one of the layers is a layer of rock, 4 inches a layer of rock, 2 to 4 inches. And then on top of that, you put that French drain. And you can see that black pipe there. That's the French drain. It has little holes all the way along it there. Make allowance for condensed water to drain out. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to take the hottest air from the top of the greenhouse. Hot air can absorb more water than cold air. And so we're going to take that hot air and we're going to put it down into the ground, which is going to be cooler. And so we're going to get condensation. So we're going to get water there. We've got to have a way for that water to drain off. Otherwise, we're going to have an underground swimming pool here, and it's going to drown your plants. So you've got to make allowance for that water to drain out there. If you can make it drain to gravity feed to outside, that's great. If you can't, you may have to have a sump in there. Okay, adding the French drain. And you can see in the corners over there that we've got the end of that pipe, and then it snakes back and forth, and then this end here is going to go right up to the very top, the hottest place in the greenhouse there. Now, when you're doing this, you need to tie a plastic bag or a rag or something over the end of that, because if you get mud, dirt down in there, it's not going to work. You've got to have air flow through there, or it's going to be a problem there. Okay, so it's snaked around on the rock layer. We need to put it on top of the rock layer, with each end protruding out of the top at opposite corners. The reason for this is to get air to the plant roots, air for the microbes, and we're going to use this for heating besides, and cooling. By adding a small fan to the pipe, we can store excess heat in the ground. This heat can be used later on cold nights by running the fan and blowing the heat into the greenhouse growing area. The efficiency of this system is increased many-fold by a phase change in water. Okay, you ladies, as you're cooking, you have a constant heat on, and you've got a pan on the stove with water in it. And that water, the temperature goes up and up and up at a pretty consistent rate, and then all of a sudden it stops. And you're putting the same amount of heat in there. You're putting the same amount of heat in there, but it looks like nothing's happening. It's just stayed there. What's happening is it's got to this phase change, and then all of a sudden it turns to boiling. That's the phase change. Now, when there's a phase change, there's extra heat required or extra heat release, depending on which way we're going. And it happens, there's a phase change when we change water to steam and steam to water. There's a phase change. So there's a huge release of energy in there. And this system is much increased. The efficiency of this system is much increased because of that phase change. A whole lot more than if we just had hot water sitting there. Now the same thing happens when we have a phase change from water to ice and from ice to water. So we use that to our advantage here. Okay, now we're layering in the soil amendments, and just like we threw in the soil amendments to that garden this morning, this is all tested and we put the right amendments into it. One person is shoveling in topsoil, another the compost, and another the custom blended fertilizers there, while making sure that the hose ends and the French drain do not get buried there. So you can see on one side we're throwing in some black dirt there, and on the other side they're throwing in some topsoil, and we just go around the circle and get this thing filled up there. Okay. Here we are doing that soil. Okay. Okay, the owner of this particular greenhouse added some simple hoop structures topped with plastic. Now he just went down and got some PVC pipe. Matter of fact, most of it was just scrap. And he just made some simple hoops over this greenhouse structure and got a clear piece of plastic, cheap stuff, and put it over there. He was thrilled with the results. He has 2 young daughters, and they would run out there every morning to the greenhouse to eat cherry tomatoes for breakfast there. Anybody here acquainted with Little Light Ministry? Okay, some of you guys know Little Light Ministry. This is Tommy Meyer, who is one of the guys who started Little Light Ministry, and he has these 2 beautiful little girls, and they just love cherry tomatoes, and they'd run out every morning to get their cherry tomatoes from the greenhouse there. Okay, let's go on to another one. I want to go back to this a minute. I think Tommy said he had about $200 total. In other words, he just had scrap. He and his brother and a friend came over and they put their labor into it, and they had about $200 total into this particular greenhouse. Pretty inexpensive there. Okay, let's go on to the screenhouse combo. This is in the tropics. There, this is in Brazil, where the insects were so numerous. We got the material for the sides from an Italian company. It is a screening type material that is so tight that a gnat can't get through it. Air could get through it, but with a big wind, there was a very slow breeze that went through it there. So I told you about the problems we had with these insects there, and whenever it rained, the insects would just multiply. They don't have any winter there, so they don't have any winter kill-off for the insects like we do here. So it was a big problem. Besides that, they have 2 seasons there. It's the dry season and the rainy season. And the dry season is wet, and the rainy season is too wet to grow tomatoes and almost anything else. So all the farms around here, they don't grow in the wet season. They only grow in the dry season because it's too wet otherwise. And so the top of this greenhouse is a clear plastic, it's greenhouse plastic, which sheds the rain. So we can control the excess water. We can get rid of that excess water there. Now that means we have to irrigate inside the greenhouse, but that's not a problem here. And then these walls. Now in this case, we did not need to go very deep because they don't have gophers here. Matter of fact, they didn't have mice. They had some rats, but they didn't seem to burrow. They didn't have any squirrels. They had a few monkeys, but they were not a problem on the farm anywhere. Some places monkeys are a big problem there. So we just had a shallow foundation around. This was a block foundation there, and about that deep. Now the only thing that burrowed that I could see there were the 2-headed snakes. Now they have a lot of snakes there, and some of them are deadly poison. They're vipers and whatever, and coral snakes and whatever. Anyway, but these 2-headed snakes are not poisonous. We were building a septic system for this little school, and so we had a hole dug in the ground that was at least 10 feet deep, maybe 12 feet deep, and down in the bottom of that hole I noticed one day that there were some holes coming in. I couldn't figure out what it was, so I got down in there and sure enough found one of these 2-headed snakes down there. Now this is an interesting thing because it's got a head on this side and on this side, and they burrow way down in the ground. They're not poisonous, so I wasn't worried about them, but they burrow way down in the ground, and if they get stuck going this way, they just go back out the other way there. So they're interesting. The other snakes wouldn't come in, and we had no problem with that. Now in this case we used cement posts, because if we had used wood, the termites would have eaten it up very quickly. So there's a little wood in this greenhouse, but very, very little there. Okay, planting areas were prepared the Ellen White method. You can see we have those raised beds there, and before we put the greenhouse up, we went through with a backhoe and we dug these trenches and filled those the Ellen White method there. So this greenhouse now is almost done, almost ready to be planted there. Well, I'll go back to this one. The end result with this is that they have wonderful produce all year round in that greenhouse with no insect damage whatsoever. No sprays. Now, these people wanted to be 100% organic, meaning no harmful sprays whatsoever there, and so we were able to do this here. And they have wonderful tomatoes. They have great big yellow tomatoes that are delicious, and we had zucchini and cucumbers and other things that we just couldn't grow outside without the insect problem. No insect problem here whatsoever. That's excluded there. Okay, let's go to simple hoop houses. Okay, this is in Coloma, California, and this particular bed was made before I got there. A guy called me. His name is Fred, and Fred owns Coloma Resort. Now, Coloma, California is where gold was discovered in California, and so he's got a resort there, camping, kids come and they have educational things. They are able to pan for gold and look at the museums and all of that type of thing there. And it's a good educational field trip for them. So Fred came to me and he said, hey, I would like to add gardening for these kids that come. I would like to see them be introduced to gardening. Well, that touches my heart. I like to see kids involved with the garden. I said, oh, sure, Fred, let's do that. We're all for that. So I started to prepare the beds and get things done there. And Fred came to me with a whole big box full of seeds. And he said, here, I want you to grow these. And I went through those, and they were all cool weather crops. Okay, they were kale and lettuce and spinach and all these cool weather crops there. And I said, Fred, this is Coloma, California. This is summer. We're going to have 100-degree plus temperatures here. And he said, well, I don't care. I want you to grow them anyway. So we just can't grow those. If I try to grow lettuce outside in this environment, it just bolts and it's bitter. You can't eat it there. Well, what Fred didn't tell me is that he had prostate cancer and that he wanted to treat it as naturally as he knew how. So he wanted these things for green drinks there. And I didn't learn about the cancer for some time. But what we did is we took, you can see just the simple hoops there, and then we used a 65% shade. That means 35% of the sunlight is still going through. You can see that here that we can push this back or pull it down. So we would pull this down to about here, so there's about a foot here and about a foot on the other side, so you have free flow of air through there. If you pull that shade cover all the way down, it will be warmer under there than outside. If you have a free flow of air there, you've lowered the temperature by about 15 degrees. So if it's 100 degrees out, that means it's 85 degrees underneath that cover. And we were able to successfully grow all those cool weather crops all summer long. Now, that particular year, in August and September, every single day the temperature was at least 95 to 107 degrees. That's Fahrenheit. So that's hot. And yet we were able to grow all of those plants there. As I came down to the end of there, I had bought a little 6-pack of celery. And I got 3 of them planted underneath the shade cover. And then the next 3 had to be planted just beyond that. Now it's the same water, it's the same soil, it's the same fertilizer, it's everything. One is under shade and the other is in the full sunshine. Those 3 plants, celery plants in the full sunshine, they struggled. They made kind of bitter, tough celery, while the 3 inside just grew wonderfully big and nice and healthy there. So a little bit of shade made a lot of difference in it there. Here's a picture of it without the shade cover there, and this just has an insect cover on it there now. This is back in Brazil, and we did a similar thing there where we just used some native materials and some PVC pipe, and so we were able to put this screening above the tomatoes so that we could grow tomatoes there without having all of that problem there on it. Okay, so we can eat out of the garden year round. We can do some expensive things. We can do some very inexpensive things, and some things in between that would allow us to have good, healthy food way beyond what we could get otherwise. All right. Don't quite know where to begin here. I was married for 53 years to my wife, and I lost her a year and a half ago to ovarian cancer. And I thought I had absolutely failed as soon as we got the diagnosis. I did everything that I could. I was up almost every night till midnight researching, trying to figure out anything that might help there. After all, I teach how to grow healing foods, and we have, through the CHIP program and other things, we've had lots of people that have been healed, and so I was determined that I would do whatever I could to save her. We got the diagnosis in January sometime, and she died in April. So February, March, and April, about 3 months, and she was gone that fast. And we were talking to her doctors one day in the hospital, and these were good doctors. They're Loma Linda trained, good men. And her doctor for the last 30 some years is a gynecologist. Well, he was her doctor when she was having children, and he was a regular medical doctor, so she just kept him all this time. Now, if anybody should have caught ovarian cancer, should have been a gynecologist. But what I hear is that many times a gynecologist will not even catch this in his own wife. It has no outward signs until the very end, when it kind of overwhelms the whole body there. So anyway, we're talking to these doctors, and they said to me, Lynn, Elizabeth has probably had this disease for at least 15 years, probably more like 20 years. Yes. And the only reason that she survived is because of her lifestyle and the way she ate. So she was born with some medical problems. And in spite of that, she was 73 years old when she died. She's number 9 of 10 children. She lived more years than any of her siblings, except for one sister, more years than her mother or her father in total years. I think those Brazilian flies followed me here. Anyway, so perhaps it was not a total failure. After all, she got an extra 15 years or so of life that she probably would not have had otherwise. Now, we all know that sooner or later we're going to die. Solomon says 70 years and maybe 80 if by chance you're strong. Today, if we make it to 90, we've done a pretty good job there. So anyway, we're all going to die sooner or later there. But what is 73 years in this case, as opposed to 1,000 years in heaven, without disease, without pain? Or what is 73 years compared to eternity there? So I want to tell you that if we help our neighbors out here in the community, if we help them live an extra 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, that's a tremendous gift to people. Having 15 extra years, watching her grandchildren grow up and whatever, that's a tremendous gift to anybody there. But we've totally missed the point if we haven't introduced them to forever, to God's wanting, to God's reaching out, desperately trying to attract them to save them there. And I believe that through agriculture we can do some things that we could not possibly do otherwise. Now, we've talked about what we can do in the field, and we can grow produce that is just so much superior to anything we can buy in the grocery store there, and it's so much more healing too, and tastes so much better. But what would happen if we combined this agriculture program with, let's say, a Bible outreach, let's say Bible worker or literature evangelist? Okay, so this is the way it would work. The literature evangelist goes out and knocks on doors. The Bible worker goes out and knocks on doors. Now, in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, the literature evangelism work and agriculture have largely died in the last 70 years there. So when I was a kid and I would go out and knock on doors and sell books in the summertime to earn a scholarship so I could go back to school in the fall, I'd see those people. Most of them I only saw once in my whole life, never see them again there. And that's true with most literature evangelists today. They see those people once. On the other hand, we all have to eat, and we have to eat often. So if we combine the two, this is how it works. The literature evangelist is out there, and they are educating the people as to why this food is better and how it's better. And now the entering wedge has always been the health message there. So we do exactly the same thing. We would make one difference, and that is, instead of just talking about the health and the food, we would actually give them a sample from the farm. So it could be a number of different things, but let's just assume that we're going to use cherry tomatoes at this point, because they're small, they're easy to use there. So we can get cherry tomatoes with this Brix reading up around 17, 18, which are absolutely delicious there. We can go to the grocery store, to Costco or wherever, and buy tomatoes that look identical, that have a Brix reading of maybe 4 or 5, maybe even it's 7 like these were today here. But there's a huge difference in the flavor there. So this free sample comes now to the potential customer, and a little card that just says why the tremendous difference in flavor and how we got that difference by growing it the right way, and what that means to your health and the health of your family. Now, people will quickly and easily pay for taste difference. So if we have the taste and we have the health benefits, people will very quickly pay the difference. It costs more money to grow food this way than it does using all the shortcuts there. It takes more labor, it takes more inputs there, it just costs more. So the farmer has got to sell that produce at a higher price if he's going to stay in business there. Well, so the literature evangelist is educating those people. And then we have what's called farm boxes or CSA boxes, where people sign up and they get a regular box each week or maybe every other week there of produce, whatever's available on the farm that week. There, usually it's 6 to 8 or 10 items in there. Now, as these boxes go out, this is a perfect time to put in little recipes if you've got something that's unusual. It's a perfect time, because this is coming from a Christian farmer, to put in a little promise, maybe something out of the Bible or just an encouraging note or something that's upbeat there, not a sermon, just something so that people know we're concerned about them. Now, when your church now has a cooking school, these people will get a personal invitation which says, we have a cooking school at wherever, and we're using the same produce from the same farm where you're getting your produce. Do you think those people will come to cooking school? You bet they would. If there's any chance they can make it, they'll be there, because you're using their produce from the same farm there, and they want to know how to do that there. Now, later, if there's a depression recovery or some other health program, they're very likely to come. Then we take it to the next step. We can say to them, look, we have let's say a revelation seminar or a prophecy seminar, and things are happening right now in the world that were predicted 3,000 years ago by Daniel the prophet, and 2,000 years ago by Jesus and by John in Revelation there. And those things are happening right now, right on schedule now. And you're invited. We want you to come there. Now, if we've already made friends with them, they know that we have their best interest at heart. They're likely to come. Not everybody will come, but many, I believe, will come. I also believe that many, many people will be very grateful that we warned them. Very grateful, first, that we gave them better health, better nutrition, and then we warned them as to the things that are coming on the earth. Listen, if there's a bridge out here and the traffic is going like crazy, and just traffic is driving into the river because they can't see there, if we could be out there stopping that traffic, we could, we'd do anything we could to stop those people, because they're going to go off the bridge and die there. That's what's happening to this world. We're going to go off this bridge and die. So it's the same type of urgency, and some of those people are going to come into the church. They're going to be very grateful that we warned them, because we saved their lives. God saved their lives, but we warned them. Those people, I believe, would be very, very enthusiastic workers. They would come into the church and they would be doing the same thing, going out and talking to their friends and their family, trying to save them in the same way. So this is kind of what needs to happen here. As far as the farmer benefiting the colporteur, when the colporteur is out there selling books, if he sells a $20 book today, $10 goes to pay for the book, and $10 goes to pay the colporteur for his work there. So let's say we had a $40 box that goes out there. The first time that box goes out to these people, $20 goes to pay the colporteur, and $20 goes to the farmer. Well, that $20 is only a wholesale price to the farmer. Now the next week, the second week, that literature evangelist does not need to sell that box again. He doesn't even need to be there. He's already sold it. He's already signed these people up, and they're getting this regularly. So it would be unfair to the farmer to continue that wholesale price. But let's change this so that now the literature evangelist gets, let's say, $3. Now this is all, we can change this, we can tweak this, but let's say he gets $3 for every box now that is delivered to that family, as long as there are customers there. What they're doing is they're building up a residual income there. The farmer, when the crop comes in, he's so busy he does not have time to get out there and sell. He is doing everything just to get that crop in. Otherwise, it's going to go to waste in the field there. So it benefits the farmer. Now he is getting retail value for his food. The colporteur is getting a residual income there, and over a period of time, that colporteur, that Bible worker, can build up an income that would be a livable income. Now, nobody's going to get filthy rich off of this, but they could certainly have a decent income. Today we have people going through all these schools of evangelism and what have you. Doug Batchelor has his, and there's Souls East and West, and schools of the prophets, and all this type of thing. And most of those people are young people. They're on fire for God. They're likely to fall in love, get married, have a child, and they cannot possibly live off of a stipend or off of a volunteer income. We need a way that they can make a livable income, and we can do this. It benefits the farmer, and it benefits the literature evangelist or the Bible worker there, so that both strengthen each other. Because of changes in the laws, in the United States anyway, it became very impractical to have colporteurs as employees of the church. 70 years ago and before, they were employees of the church. That meant they had health insurance. that meant they had retirement there. Today they don't have that. They have to be independent agents. So this is a way to cover that and have that go through. Okay, let's just go through this quickly here. Okay, God's plan for Israel was for every family to have a home on the land with sufficient ground for tilling. Thus were provided both the means and the incentive for a useful, industrious, and self-supporting life. And no devising of men has ever improved upon that plan. That's from the Ministry of Healing. Now, I'm very excited at what they're doing in northeast Jamaica, because they're trying to put that plan into effect. They're trying to put people onto small pieces of land with a little greenhouse, so that they can make a living, so that they have both the incentive and the means for making a livelihood there. Okay, here we have literature evangelists going out. We read that already there. Now there's a picture of a particular garden box. It could come in all kinds of different sizes and shapes and whatever. There. There's a bigger one. Then when we have a cooking school, people will be interested in coming. And then when we have other outreach programs, people are very likely to come and to do this. Anyway, that's a dream that I have. We've got an extra person, animal here. That's just a dream that I have, and if any of you are interested in going forward with that, we have people who have land who would love for some strong young person to come and work it, and we have young people who maybe don't have land but would like to go someplace and do that. So anyway, we can put people together and make this type of thing happen.